What's going on, everybody? Eric here, and I'm covering some of the Security Plus objectives inside of the CompTIA Security Plus examination for certification. And in this one, we're going to be covering Objective 1.8 as we continue our trek through some of these objectives to build out our Security Plus Tidbits playlist. Now, Objective 1.8 is explain the techniques used in penetration testing. And this is covered inside of our book for Panola students in Chapter 5. And here we're going to be covering the basics of pen testing. Now, why do we pen test? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. And first and foremost, we need to understand that pen testing is used to test our systems. Could be one, could be many, or our network. And why are we doing it? More specifically, to test for vulnerabilities that may be out there for other threat vectors to be utilized for attackers. See, if we do it ourselves and we report our own faults, we can fix them before they're leveraged by the baddies, right? Now, in addition to all that, we can actually address an attack in the process if we happen to catch it while it's going on. Because generally, and we'll touch on this in a minute, that pen testing is approved by the organization, and we may or may not have an idea if that pen testing is actually ongoing. We may be given a window of a couple of days or like 5 minutes. It depends on the rules of engagement. But if we can actually catch it while it's ongoing, just like a regular attack, we can learn from it and figure out what is actually happening, get the 5 W's of what's going on, and build better defenses for it. Now, most importantly, when we look at actually being a pen tester, we have to think like a hacker. And in this case, we need to understand how we do this. And for actually broken down detailed pen testing, follow me on CBT Nuggets, where I actually do some play along at home videos and skills, so we can actually all learn together how to break and wreck house on a system. But pen testing is broken down into some very simple steps, and I'm going to go over a couple of them here. Ready? Number 1, scan the network. Now, we could usually use tools like Nmap or ZenMap, if you like the GUI form of Nmap, to kind of map out what's actually on the network. Now, this is stuff that actually responds, is on at the time, or is open to response. There could be a firewall rule that says stop responding. Now, in addition to that, this is kind of like rule 1A, if you will. We can also use public records to help us, such as ICANN or Whois database. So we can build out more information through open source intelligence to build out that network map of what it is that we're actually about to pen test. Step number 2, do a vulnerability assessment. So now that we know what all's live on the network, we could use programs like Nessus or whatever we use for our vulnerability assessment to go through and map out if there's any system or device that has a vulnerability that can be leveraged. Number 3, try to social engineer a user. This is usually done with a phishing email or those 20 questions you get on Facebook about, name stuff in your history that people can use to recover your password from. But when we social engineer a user that's on that network, we could potentially get, let's say, a username and or maybe a password. And we can log in even though it's a regular user, we can start sensing out the network from behind the firewall and inside the weeds of enemy territory. Number 4, leverage a vulnerability against a system. Now, in my detailed pen testing videos on CBT Nuggets, we go into Metasploit, MSF Venom, and a few other programs to do this. But we're here just referring back to step number 2, where we do a vulnerability assessment. Because if we know what vulnerabilities are out there, we can actually start building a detailed list of how to attack a system. Without doing that vulnerability assessment, that leads us to try every vulnerability under the sun and hope it works. Very similar to throwing a bowl of noodles at a wall and seeing what sticks. So in the effort to save time, do a vulnerability assessment and then start attacking from there. Now, I know what you're thinking at home. What does pen testing do for us as an organization or as an actual pen tester? Well, I'm glad you asked, because what it primarily does is help us identify security flaws that may exist within the organization, such as on the system and or network. But if we bring in pen testers to do this and leverage those security flaws, we can find out before the baddies do, and we can actually build active defenses against those security vulnerabilities. And with an official pen testing that occurs for our organization, now think enterprise level here for a second, or even, let's say, medium organization level, we would usually get a report back from the pen tester saying what they found, how they found it, what they did, with all the 5 W's of how they did it. Now, at that true enterprise level, we're talking like hundreds of employees, CIO, CISO positions, all those fancy chief titles. This is going to be referred to as an executive summary. Now, there are many different reasons that we can have an executive summary, but in pen testing, the executive summary is a breakdown of cradle to grave what happened during that pen test cycle of the organization. And it helps us in threat hunting. Now, what do I mean by threat hunting? Well, if the pen tester was able to come in and leverage some vulnerabilities, we can obviously build defenses for that, but we can even go further and build out profiles for our IDS, intrusion detection system, or IPS, intrusion protection system, that's tailored against some of those methods used by the pen tester. So we're actually hunting out that threat before it becomes an actual threat. But do keep in mind that's within the confines of our own organization and network. I bring that up because it's a legal issue as well, which is the next point of why we pen test. It legally allows pen testers to come into our organization and not be arrested as hackers against the organization. Because as we know in the United States, unauthorized access to an individual system or network can be hit with criminal charges. But if there's a contract or a memorandum of understanding or something along those lines, pen testing can and is authorized within that network. And don't forget, without that permission to pen test against an organization, you're just a regular hacker, and you could be subject to your jurisdiction's rules, regulations, and laws. Please keep that in mind. All right, so now that we get the basics of what pen testing actually is, let's wrap up with what types of pen testers are out there, because there are 3 different types, and we're going to cover them real quick. You ready? Go. First and foremost, we have white box. Now, white box pen testing is where a pen tester has a lot of information. So the rules of engagement are set from the beginning that the pen tester has, let's say, a list of all IP addresses belonging to the organization, username and passwords, specific systems that need to be stress test or vulnerability assessed, whatever the case may be. But there's a lot of information there, and the pen tester's going in basically with the keys to the castle, all but like 1 or 2 of them. And then from there, they build out a detailed report of security assessment. Now, just on the opposite spectrum of that, we have black box pen testing, where no information is given to the pen tester other than this is the organization that you're going to be pen testing against. So the attacker's going in pretty much blind and left to their own devices to figure out what's inside of the system or network, how do we leverage it, and how do we find out more information? Now, somewhere in the middle of all that is going to be gray box pen testing, and that is where the pen tester may be given some information, but not all of it. Now, as an example of this, you could have a pen tester that comes into the organization and given a list of IPs that belongs to everybody within that organization. Now, why would we do this? Well, simply put, the reason that we do stuff with gray box pen testing is so that way they know the confines of what their pen testing actually is. And they don't start going off into the wilderness testing everything under the sun, because it may be covered under the rules of engagement for our organization, but it may not belong to them later on if the pen tester starts going out on their own and getting all Rambo on us and everything. We may have somebody call us up later on saying, hey, what's your pen tester doing over here when they should be pen testing inside of your own organization? And again, without permission, you're an outlaw. And the rules of engagement are going to cover what exactly it is we do as pen testers. So do we go in and leverage the system all the way and just completely destroy it? Or do we just leverage a security vulnerability just to say we did and show proof that we did, so that way we could start building out better security procedures for that? Rules of engagements are everything, and that's something that varies between every pen tester in every organization. So do keep that in mind as well. All right, so that wraps it up for this objective. We're going to be adding more to the channel as we go about and make sure that we all have a firm understanding of some of these inside of the CompTIA Security Plus world for exam and certification. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Check out panola.edu. Leave a comment below if I need to add anything else to the channel, or if there's something else you want to see in particular, or just say hi. Anyway, that's all I got. See you next time.